Think your assets are safe in the U.S.? Think again. One lawsuit can wipe out decades of hard work. But what if there was a vault, not in your backyard, but in a Caribbean island called Nevis that made your money practically untouchable? And today, I'm going to tell you exactly how much it costs to set up a Nevis Trust and why it's one of the strongest lawsuit shields on earth and whether it's worth the price tag. So stay with me because in a few minutes, I'll reveal the hidden fee that most people forget about when calculating the cost of a Nevis Trust. Let's get right into it. Why Nevis? All the offshore trust jurisdictions, Cook Islands, Belize, Jersey, Guernsey, Nevis consistently ranks among the best. And here's why. Bond requirement for creditors. If a creditor wants to bring a lawsuit against a Nevis Trust, they must first post a bond, and not a tiny one. We're talking $100,000 just to get into court. That instantly weeds out frivolous lawsuits. Next, confidentiality. Unlike some jurisdictions, Nevis doesn't require your trust to be part of a public record. So no nosy neighbors, no hungry lawyers Googling your trust. Next, immunity from U.S. court rulings. A U.S. judge can scream, threaten, and bang that gavel all day long, but Nevis trustees are not required to honor U.S. court order. Creditors have to start fresh in Nevis under Nevis law, which is not exactly debtor-friendly. So if you're a U.S.-based physician, entrepreneur, or real estate investor worth $1 million, $5 million, or even $20 million in assets, Nevis is like putting your wealth behind a moat filled with sharks. Now here's the kicker. The law in Nevis allows you to build in flexibility. In fact, we often structure these trusts with a Nevis LLC inside. In fact, almost always do. In fact, we've set up more Nevis LLCs, by the way, than anybody in the world. You, the client, get to be the manager of that LLC, which means you keep the day-to-day control. Now, the licensed bonded trustee company law firm we work with only steps in if and when a lawsuit hits. Now, I've been setting up offshore trusts, including Nevis Trust, for nearly 30 years, and I've been in the asset protection field for 34 years. My law firm, Lawyers Limited, along with Asset Protection Planners, a brand name that we do the asset protection structures through, has set up more Cook Islands trusts than any firm in the world. And while Cook Islands is often the gold standard, Nevis has become a powerful alternative, sometimes at a slightly lower cost. And of course, I really love the Nevis Four Seasons hotels. It's one of the most beautiful hotels in the world. Been there many times, absolutely gorgeous. And it's also closer to the US. Now, speaking of cost, let's go ahead and talk numbers. So how much does a Nevis Trust actually cost? Here's the breakdown. Setup fees between $20,000 to $30,000 US dollars. This includes drafting the trust deed, setting up the Nevis LLC, opening offshore bank accounts, and all of the legal planning involved. Annual maintenance fees, typically $3,500 to $8,500 per year. So why the difference? Well, it depends on if you need a Nevis LLC inside, or if you need two, or if you need other structures that encompass your asset protection plan. So this covers the Nevis government, renewals fees, registered agent fees, and trustee oversight. Protector fees, if you choose to add a protector, a watchdog role that oversees the trustee, you're usually looking at an additional $1,000 to $3,000 per year. So let's do the math. To set up a Nevis Trust, you usually spend somewhere around $20,000 to $30,000, sometimes $35,000 up front, and then $3,500 to $8,500 annually, depending on what other needs that you have and protect to keep it running. Now, at that point, you might be thinking, oh, that sounds expensive. But before you make that judgment, let me ask you this. What's more expensive, paying $25,000 to protect $5 million or losing $5 million to a single lawsuit? And stick with me because in a few minutes, I'm going to reveal the one situation where a Nevis Trust can actually save you millions compared to other offshore trusts. Now, not all Nevis Trusts are created equally. Just like cars, you can buy a base model sedan or you can fully load it with every bell and whistle. Here's what impacts the final cost. First of all, the complexity of the structure. A simple Nevis Trust with one LLC inside of it costs less than a structure with multiple LLCs, a protector, bank accounts in Switzerland, and equity stripping strategies for U.S. real estate. Types of assets. Real estate is a big one. If you own properties in the U.S., you can't just deed them into your Nevis Trust. That could trigger all kinds of extra challenges challenges because U.S. courts do have jurisdiction over U.S. real estate. So that's the reason why we use other strategies such as equity stripping, placing liens on the property payable to your Nevis LLC, and then get a third-party lender involved if needed to pull out that equity and put it into your offshore trust. Now that adds extra complexity and yes, cost. Next, customization. A cookie cutter trust is cheaper, but a customized trust tailored to your assets, your risk profile, and your family needs, that's where the value comes in. Now, case in point, one of my clients, a real estate developer in California, had $12 million in assets spread across multiple LLCs. The complexity of his trust structure meant setup costs were closer to $40,000, but here's the good news. He later faced a $6 million lawsuit, and the Nevis Trust kept every dime safe. So was that $40,000 expensive, or was it the best investment he ever made? Okay, now you might be wondering, is Nevis cheaper than other offshore jurisdictions? So let's compare, say, the Cook Islands Trust. This is the gold standard. Costs are similar. The setup fees are usually $20,000 to $35,000 range, and the annual fees are around $4,000 to $8,000. Belize Trust, same cost, $20,000 to $30,000, annual fees of $3,000 to $5,000 range. But Belize is a bit more of a third world country, which makes it less appealing for some clients, but also very, very strong asset protection, very trustworthy. And if you're already in a lawsuit right now, that's usually the jurisdiction because some of the other jurisdictions resist setting up the trust if you're already in litigation. So already in litigation, Belize is the way to go, and it's a very good, strong jurisdiction as well. Domestic asset protection trust. Yes, they may be cheaper, sometimes $12,000 to $18,000, but they don't hold up nearly as well in court. A U.S. judge can pierce a domestic trust far more easily than a trust in Nevis or the Cook Islands or Belize. So in the offshore world, Nevis tends to be mid-range, about the same cost as a Cook Islands trust, but with almost equal strength. And it's far stronger than domestic trust, which can end up really giving you a false sense of security. Okay, now here's the million-dollar or maybe multi-million-dollar question. Is a Nevis trust worth the cost? So the answer really depends on your situation. A Nevis trust is worth it if you're a physician, a business owner, a real estate investor with significant liability exposure. You have $1 million or more in assets and you can't afford to lose. You want to pass wealth on to your children or grandchildren without creditors getting their hands on it. You're worried about divorce, business partner disputes, or creditor claims. Here's a real example. A client of mine, a physician in New York, had $3.5 million in savings and investments. He was facing a malpractice claim. Now, the Nevis Trust setup cost him around $25,000 plus $5,000 per year in maintenance. Now, that trust ultimately prevented a $2.2 million judgment from touching his personal assets. So do the math. That's a return on investment you can't beat. So while, yes, $25,000 sounds like a lot, it's pennies compared to the millions you stand to lose without it. And that's the reason why we talk about a minimum net worth to make setting up a trust worth it, because for some, it's just pennies, and some, if you have less than $500,000, it's going to take a little bit more of a bite, but of course less than taking everything you have. Okay, so let's go ahead and address the cliffhanger that I mentioned earlier, the hidden fee that nobody talks about when setting up a Nevis Trust. It's not a government fee, it's not a trustee fee, it's time. The biggest mistake I see people making is waiting until after they're sued to set up the trust. And by then, it's often too late. Courts call it a fraudulent transfer if you move assets after the lawsuit starts. And that especially holds true in divorce cases, because once you're served with the divorce, it's over. That means the true cost of the Nevis Trust isn't $25,000. It's legal fees. It's the timing. You wait until it's too late, the cost could mean you really lose everything. So the smartest, most cost-effective move is to set it up before the storm hits. So think of it like insurance. You don't buy flood insurance when the water's already lapping at your front door. They won't even sell it to you. You buy it when the sky is clear. So let's recap. A Nevis Trust typically costs $20,000 to $30,000 to set up, plus $3,500 to $8,000 per year to maintain, depending on what else you have inside of it. And the cost varies based on complexity, the type of assets, customization. And keep in mind, the numbers I'm giving here are as of this video. If you call us in, if you see this video, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, the costs are going to be different naturally. So compared to other jurisdictions, Nevis is strong, it's confidential, and often more affordable than the Cook Islands, while being far stronger than domestic trusts. And most importantly, the real cost is waiting too long. So is a Nevis Trust worth the price? Well, if you're protecting millions of dollars from lawsuits, divorces, and business risk, the answer is a resounding yes. Now, before we wrap up, if you're serious about protecting your wealth, give us a visit at assetprotectionplanners.com. And as CEO of the Lawyers Limited Law Firm and Asset Protection Planners, my team and I have been in this field for 34 years. I've personally been in the field for 34 years, and we'll walk you through the structure that makes the most sense for you. And hey, if you found this valuable, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now if you haven't already. I've got more deep dives coming up, like the surprising way billionaires hide their assets in plain sight. You don't want to miss it. So I'm the business guy. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.